So looking at the formula of how internal states are calculated, we can see that if we have outputs, we might be able to recover other internal states because one internal state only depends on 3 other states. So we've seen we can invert the post-processing, so given an output we can recreate an internal state, and then we should be able to solve equations to find previous outputs, right? So I want to show an example. Imagine you have a Python script that does something like this. It creates a random key for the session, and then it gives you an oracle where every time you request something encrypted, it gives you a new IV, right? Because the IV has to be fresh per encryption. So with this oracle, there's one key that is static, but the IVs are always different. But as you can see, the key and the IV come from the same randomness source. That is Python random, which uses a Mersenne twister. So what would we do? Well, we have a key and an IV. Both are 128 bits long. They come from Python's Mersenne twister, which outputs 32-bit numbers. And if you request more bits, it just concatenates multiple outputs of the Mersenne twister. So what we actually got were 8 outputs, 4 for the key, 4 for the IV. And these outputs we can revert and calculate the internal states, right? So since we know that a state only depends on 3 numbers, we request more and more IVs until we are at this IV. Now this random number, like the third block of the 128-bit IV, depends only on 3 outputs, or 3 internal states actually. This one that we have, and those 2 that we don't have, because they're part of the key actually. So since we have this output, we can just calculate those 2. Well, we have the equations here. We invert, so we go from output to internal state. Then we have this internal state and this internal state. So we can just move this here, right? XOR it on this internal state. Then we have these numbers, this number here. So just by XORing those 2 together, we have the lowest 30 bits of this state and the highest bit of this state. So we have recovered the lowest 30 bits of the last 32 bits of the key and the highest bit of this block. And of course we can do that for all the values. We can then slide. We can then use this value and this value to recover this value and the highest bit of this value, and so on and so forth. So just with an oracle like that just gives us IVs, we collect enough internal states of the Mersenne twister to calculate what was before and to calculate the key. And that was it about the Mersenne Twister.